His findings. The treatise proposed that tactical nuclear weapons be developed and a bomb shelter be built in every house in preparation for limited thermonuclear war. The willingness to engage in nuclear war when necessary is part of the price of our freedom, Kissinger argued. So those of you my age can recall the anxiety grade school students felt while drilling for possible nuclear attacks. You can thank Kissinger and the Rockefeller-led military industrialists for this prize for freedom. Eisenhower, you may remember, warned America that the gravest threat to world security, democracy, and even spirituality was the growing military-industrial complex. And the Rockefellers and Kissinger played leading roles in its evil expansion. Bent on creating what President Bush openly heralded as a new world order, few people realize the current international alignment of economic powers is a direct result of actualizing Henry Kissinger's contemporary manifesto tribute to the sovereign military order of Malta entitled The Meaning of History. In this Kissinger 1955 Harvard doctoral thesis he argues that the concept of peace on earth is naive. Peace must be secured by the creation of small wars around the planet on a continuing basis so as to maintain an international order of economic powers, and of course, keep the military industrialists happy. In my latest book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola Nature, Accident, or Intentional, I traced Dr. Eric Jobs' movements to the U.S. Naval Medical Research Institute, where he conducted experiments on animals to determine the lethal doses of more than 40 strains of highly infectious viruses. Within 10 years, the Navy's Biomedical Research Laboratory, in association with the University of California, along with Lytton Bionetics, became a chief supplier of viruses and cell cultures for NCI researchers throughout the world. Funding for this work was largely controlled by the NCI, Rockefeller and Sloan Foundations. A search through Sloan Foundation's annual reports, on file in Manhattan's New York Public Library, revealed 9 ghastly and incriminating reasons that, most incredibly, tied all the elements of my emerging viruses investigation together. The Sloan Foundation, 1, supported black educational initiatives consistent with the COINTEL pro-black nationalist hate group campaign. You may recall reports last year that in surveys of 1,000 Southern Christian African Americans, 2/3 reported their belief that the AIDS epidemic may be genocide, while 1/3 was convinced it was. 2. The Sloan Foundation administered mass media public persuasion experiments completely consistent with the CIA's Project Culture efforts to develop brainwashing technologies and drugs to affect large populations. 3. Funded much of the earliest cancer research involving the genetic engineering of mutant viruses. 4. Began major funding of the National Academy of Sciences, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, for neuroscience and molecular genetics research, the Salk Institute, for viral research, and the Scientists Institute for Public Information between 1968 and 1970. 5. Funded population control studies by Planned Parenthood World Population, New York, NY. 6. Funded the Community Blood Council of Greater New York, Incorporated, the council of doctors who established the infamous New York City Blood Bank, which allowed more than 10,000 hemophiliacs and countless others to become infected with HIV because they allegedly didn't want to spend $150 million to screen the blood. 7. Maintained Lawrence S. Rockefeller, the director of the Community Blood Council of Greater New York, the International Blood Bankers, and the president of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, as chairman of the board of the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and a trustee for the Sloan Foundation. 8. Gave in excess of $20,000 annually to the Council on Foreign Relations, and 9. Maintained among its Marketable securities, 16,505 shares of Chase Manhattan Bank stock, in 1967, which it apparently sold by 1970, probably to avoid conflict of interest charges, along with 24,40053,000 shares issued by Merck & Co., Incorporated, the company whose president, George W. Merck, was director of America's biological weapons industry, and whose hepatitis B and polio vaccines most plausibly transmitted AIDS throughout the world. Also in Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, you will learn exactly what was done with the $10 million Congress gave the DoD for the development of AIDS-like viruses, because I published irrelevant contracts. You will learn that Dr. Robert Gallo, the famous NCI molecular biologist, pardoned by President Clinton last year for scientific fraud and misconduct, and credited with the discovery of the AIDS virus, set about to develop immune system ravaging, AIDS-like viruses, along with other Lytton Bionetics researchers. You will learn that they took monkey viruses that were humanly benign, recombined them with DNA, RNA, and enzymes from other animal viruses that caused leukemias, lymphomas, and sarcomas, and then to get them to jump species, they cultured these new mutant viruses in human white blood cells in some studies, and human fetal tissue cells in other studies, to produce immune system destroying, cancer-causing viruses that could enter humans and produce virtually identical effects to what these virus is currently doing in people around the world. Indeed, it was contaminated live viral vaccines that spread this disease and likely others, including chronic fatigue, certain leukemias, and possibly Gulf War syndrome as well, to vast populations. In fact, today's live viral vaccines, including the oral polio vaccine required by law be given to our children, are still littered with simian, monkey, virus contaminants since they are developed in monkey kidney cells, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration turns a blind eye to as many as 100 live monkey virus contaminants per vaccine dose, and is barred from telling health professionals and even health scientists this truth because of pharmaceutical industry-dictated proprietary laws and non-disclosure agreements. In the end, the research question I asked, did these viruses, AIDS and Ebola, evolve naturally? Were they accidentally produced, or were they intentionally created and deployed? I conclude, unquestionably, they are not natural. I leave you the reader, and concerned citizens of America and the world, to decide whether it was a horrible accident or treacherous covert population control experiment. I ask all of you to consider the pain and cost of the current and coming plagues, including the escalating rates of virus-linked cancers like prostate and breast cancer, certain leukemias and lymphomas, and other vaccine contaminant-related illnesses including hyperactivity disorders in children and escalating sudden infant death rates. I believe you will realize that the pain and cost of denial and indifference to this horrible reality is far greater than the toll your political action might cost. I therefore urge you to join our growing grassroots network of health consumers, professionals, scientists, patriots, and concerned citizens in our search for answers and solutions. I urge you to help us pressure Congress for a full investigation of these published facts, and to allocate the funding needed to effect appropriate solutions to these urgent healthcare problems. Let me end by giving you, and our home viewers, 2 resources to contact in this effort. The first is Tetrahedron's toll-free citizen action and document order hotline 800-336-9266. And the other is our internet website address, where you can link to various supporting organizations and individuals. That address is www.tetrahedron.org. Thank you very much, and God bless.